Thank you and good evening. I heard a story one time about a man who stood up in front of a group of people and he said, "My name is Tex, and I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or a mood-altering drug since September 2nd, 1972. And a friend of his who was listening stood up and said out loud in front of everybody there, he said, "Tex, I saw you drunk the day before yesterday." He said, "That's right, but it wasn't necessary." Well, it's a kind of humorous way to begin the tale of a tragedy. He said he had been sober from such and such a date, but he obviously had been drinking since then. And I'd like to just share a few thoughts tonight about a very ordinary phenomenon in the world of alcoholism. It goes by many names: relapse, slip, road test, further research, whatever you wish to call it. Forgetting all the psychological parts, let's just define a slip or a relapse as the return to drinking after a period of sobriety. The return to drinking is a return to complete insanity. And believe it or not, that is the insanity that Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA, was referring to in step 2 when he referred to the insanity of the alcoholic. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could return us to sanity. I heard that man speak once, and I heard him define what he meant by that. He was not referring to the goofy things people do when they're drunk. Non-alcoholics who get drunk do crazy things. They're acting in a drugged condition. He explained, I heard him with his own lips, that the insanity of the alcoholic is when he is physically sober. He picks up the first drink of the next series of drinks, and that is totally irrational, insane behavior, to go back to consuming a drug that is killing him. Insanity. And the insanity is partially explained by this. With one swallow, the alcoholic, no matter how many years sober, is catapulted back into the hell from which he came in the first place. There is instant return to a life of living a lie, to the total dishonesty. Usually, the relapse has begun in hiding. I remember a friend who, we learned from a friend of his that he'd been drinking. So instead of asking him and almost begging him to lie, I simply let him know that we knew he had been drinking, but he would admit only as much as he thought we knew. It is almost a pitiable situation to watch a human being who had enjoyed so many years of sobriety go back to that horrible life of a lie that was his when he was drinking originally. It really is insane. There are many, many things that go against staying sober. 4 of the basic enemies of sobriety: youth, health, wealth, and brains. And the most dangerous is brains. I once heard a man say that the man who saved his life gave him the finest piece of advice he had ever learned. You do not need brains to get sober, you need desire. and I've seen people's intellects kill them. Number one is figuring, maybe I can handle it. I remember once out in the Midwest, a woman who was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous came up to me after a talk one night and she said, "Please pray for my father." 33 years sober. He picked up a drink, and she said his shame prevents him from returning. This is the tragedy of relapse. Some make it back, and some don't. Now, my friends, it is a simple fact of life that in our era, about half of the people who come into treatment or enter AA are repeaters. What can be done for them? Is there any way at all that we can learn a little bit about relapse, or that we can examine it to learn something from it and perhaps prevent another? I think that there is. You know, the first thing, we say it's a disease, and the part of the disease really that gets the least attention is the physical part. Alcoholism by nature is a physical thing. It's a biochemical addiction to a drug. But its repercussions are so horrible that we concentrate on the results to such a degree that even the big book of AA gives the most scientifically accurate descriptive definition of the disease when it refers to it as soul sickness. But we must never, never, never forget that its basis is physical. It is a biochemical addiction to a drug. And so the body is the source of the whole thing. Sometimes the body has been damaged, let's say through 10, 15, 20, 25 years of drinking. It has been damaged to such an extent that when the compulsion to drink sets in, it simply overcomes the desire to not drink. And isn't it strange how some people condemn those who have a slip? Have you ever heard this cruelty? Well, what step were you working when this happened? That has nothing to do with it. AA warns its sons and daughters, do not become overly tired, do not become overly hungry. It can create something in there which might set up a compulsion to drink, which overcomes the desire to stay sober. This is very real, very real. I don't know as it's addressed too often. When you function with a drugged brain for 15 years, it takes a long time for reason to go back. That's why AA it's the most wise therapy on earth. You know what she says to the victims of this disease? Just bring the body. You don't have to understand why you do certain things, you just have to do them. After a while, the mind will catch up as it gets well enough to do so. It's just so sad when we condemn very early members for having relapses. Let me share something with you. I heard a fellow down south give a talk to a great, huge room full of people. There are a lot of youngsters, brand new to sobriety in the room, and he made this statement. He said, I am sober 17 years. How many of you are sober under a year? A lot of hands went up. He said, do you know that my chances of staying sober are hundreds of times greater than yours? He said, I have had 17 years of sobriety, 17 years of meetings, 17 years of trying to help others, 17 years of listening to the wisdom of others, 17 years of letting my love of AA grow. You're brand new, you're still wobbly. Then he made this statement. Now let's have a slip. Your chances of coming back are hundreds of times greater than my chances. He said, I don't know if I'm worthy to have a chance to come back. God has given me so much. It was a very frightening thing. I've never heard it put that way, but it certainly makes us think, doesn't it? It is said in AA, what I've said so many times, the attitude is the father of the action. And so we say stinking thinking precedes the drinking. The thinking. The greatest mental obstacle to recovery is denial. Now, we've all seen it in treatment centers. Some people simply don't believe they're alcoholics. I do not believe this. I'm waiting to get out, and I'm going to drink. I remember once, I've used this so many times, this was years and years ago, a man in a hospital in Baltimore, in a semi-coma on his deathbed, opened his eyes in a brief moment of lucidity and said to 4 AA members who were standing around his bed, they had tried for years to help this man, and he said this, "I can handle this." He closed his eyes in death. Those were the last words he spoke on this earth, and the tragedy is he believed them. He believed them. He honestly believed that he could handle his drinking. He had no problem with it, and it killed him. But there's another type of denial. We see it often, and I'm sure you have. I knew a man who killed himself because of it. I know I'm playing amateur psychiatrist, but I know I'm right in this. The man was an alcoholic. And he did know it. He knew it beyond any shadow of a doubt. He just didn't want to be one. He wanted to drink and be able to handle it, and he couldn't. And his anger at the situation took itself out on everybody else. He was just an angry man. He was angry at God, he was angry at his wife, he was angry at his family, he was angry at people he knew, he was angry at people he didn't know. And he wound up taking his own life. There's a lot of tragedy wrapped up in this. Then the big ones, resentment and self-pity. The co-founder of AA said these words, and they're scary. Resentment and self-pity are luxuries that the alcoholic can ill afford. Resentment and self-pity, unless faced and handled, or at least an attempt to handle them is made, have often resulted in a return to drinking. They tell a lovely story of a fellow in an AA meeting one night. He was chairing the meeting. It was on resentments. He said, "Let's talk about resentments tonight. How many of you have resentments against anybody on earth?" Every hand in the room went up. He looked around and discovered except one. It was an old duffer, 93 years old, sitting in the back. He thought, well, I don't know, maybe he didn't hear me. How many of you resent no one on earth? The old fellow stood up. He said, "You don't resent anybody?" The old man said, "No, I don't." I said, "How come?" He said, "I outlived them all." It was the only... Impatience. Impatience with sobriety. Why am I not making progress? Why do I feel this way? Why don't I have the serenity he does? Why is my family not cooperating better? Why don't I have the support of my husband, my wife, my children? Why? Impatience with the program. Why isn't this thing working? I'm miserable. Where's all this serenity people are yakking about? And when we let that prey on our minds, then you become preoccupied with it. Frustration. I'm trying my best and they don't believe me. When will alcoholics ever realize the hundreds of broken promises? You may know that it's different this time, but it's going to take your loved ones a long time to come around to realize it. Do you know how you can be trusted? By becoming trustworthy. You stay sober today, and when tomorrow comes, you do the same thing. And when the next day comes, you do the same thing. You build up a couple of years of that, maybe people will begin to trust again. But we become so impatient, we want tomorrow yesterday. Cockiness. It's a sad thing to watch someone creep into AA, afraid to lift his or her eyes up to look others in the eye, and after 3 months walking around like the cock of the walk. It's almost scary because I think it includes a kind of a presumption on God's grace to keep me sober even though I want to walk around the edges. I think it's skating on thin ice. I think it's playing Russian roulette mentally. It's like the Irishman was ice skating, on some thin ice, and he went through. And a buddy of his said, "Well, how did you come to fall through the ice?" He said, "I didn't come to fall through the ice. I came to skate." Speaking of Irishmen, I ever tell you about the Irishman who was visiting the Holy Land. He got to the Sea of Galilee, and he said to the boatman, "What will it cost to get to the other side?" He said, $250. "Good Lord," he said, "what a price." The fellow said, "You have to remember this is the sea that our Lord walked on." He said, "At them prices, no wonder he walked." Complacency. What a disease that is. My friends, sobriety is a gift. It's a gift, and it has to be held on to with desire and at a price. Complacency is just dangerous. It's frightening. It's the emotional or mental disease of the elderly in AA. I have my years behind me. I'm safe. Oh, they don't say that. But it's something that unconsciously kind of creeps in, and you're unaware of it. And that's the insidious part of it, when the one who suffers it is unaware of it. It's a very, very dangerous thing. Depression, I don't even want to get into that. That is an illness of its own. Somebody once defined, I think some professionals define depression as frozen anger, and I think it's frozen self-pity. I went through a summer of depression in 1970 for 3 solid months. If you can believe this, I did not want to leave a dark room. And it is the most horrible thing I think I have ever experienced. You are conscious of nothing except your own pain. And I think it was only the protection of my family, Tommy and May and their son Alex, that kept me alive. That kept me alive. Oddly enough, I didn't think of a drink, but if I had and did not have the protection, God knows what would have happened to me.